Good day, everyone. Welcome to ASEAN News with me, Vanessa. Thailand decides to close business activities due to the coronavirus spike in the country.
The directives were a bit ambiguous.
คือถ้าเกิดยังไงเนี่ยควรจะแบบว่าคือฟันธงมาเลย
They, Bangkok administration, should just make up their minds to do full closure of shops or not. We all want money. It's not that we don't, but the government has been unclear about the measures. So, some of us aren't sure what can still be open. Or will it be a partial closure? As long as we keep social distance. For just over 10 days closure, we can deal with that in any case.
ไปเลยคือความจริงก็คือจะฟันธงมา10 กว่าวันโอเคเราทนกันได้อยู่แล้ว
Thailand confirms 216 new coronavirus cases and 1 new death. The country has managed to keep infection rates relatively low since the initial outbreak of the coronavirus disease. Now in the second wave, many cases are linked to a cluster among migrant workers in Samut Sakhon province south of Bangkok. Another cluster is linked to illegal gambling dens in eastern Thailand.
At least 18 people dead in Papua New Guinea landslide.
A government spokesman says a landslide in a remote region of Papua New Guinea buried 15 people, including 3 children, all feared dead. The people are asleep in longhouse near a mine where they had been panning for gold when the landslide, dragging trees and logs with it, buried the hut in the Guelala district of PNG's central province. Only 2 bodies have been recovered so far, with locals working with shovels and pitchforks to dig through the debris. The bodies recovered were those of a 19-year-old man and a woman in her 30s. Guelala's members of parliament, William Samp, who flew to the site, told the Australian Broadcaster Corporation that unfortunately there are no survivors from what they hear. The recovery effort has been hampered by heavy rains, which may have triggered the landslide and remote location, reachable only by helicopter or a 2-hour walk, a spokesman for SAMP said. Robert Agrobe, the governor of Central Province, says army specialists may need to be called in to help the recovery and prevent any further loss of life. The remoteness of the area and the lack of communications also making the planning of rescue and recovery operations difficult.
Tokyo governor and others urged Japan government to declare coronavirus emergency.
The governors of Tokyo and 3 other Japanese prefectures urged the government to declare a state of emergency following a resurgence of COVID-19 cases.
Considering the number of positive cases of this infectious disease and the current situation of medical care in Tokyo and the 3 prefectures, we judge that we need to thoroughly reduce the flow of people immediately. That is why we made this request to the Japanese government.
Economy Minister Yasutoshi Nishimura, who also present at the briefing, says the government will consider the request, but it will need to hear from experts before deciding on whether to make an emergency declaration. We need to carefully listen to experts' opinions on whether we declare a state of emergency or not. The rise in COVID-19 cases is compounding a seasonal increase in hospitalizations, says infection control manager at St. Luke's International Hospital in Tokyo. New COVID-19 infections in Tokyo hit a record 1,337 on December 31st and on Friday numbered 783. A nationwide record was also set on December 31st with 4,520 new cases.
The government moves coronavirus patients from nursing homes after deaths increasing in South Korea.
Dozens of elderly South Korean coronavirus patients are transferred from nursing homes to hospitals after criticism that government policy had led to a spike in deaths among the vulnerable residents. South Korea's total tally of infections passed 60,000 as 967 additional cases are reported.
오늘부터 21년 1월 13일까지 2주간 전 교정
The third wave of the pandemic is ongoing and it has posed many challenges and problems on quarantine measures. It is necessary to expand the number of hospital beds, epidemiological investigations and contact management capabilities due to the sudden increase of patient numbers. Also, it is important to strengthen intensive management of facilities which are vulnerable to infections such as nursing hospitals, nursing homes and mental hospitals, and also high-risk group facilities such as detention centers and dormitories.
변호인 접견도 제한적으로 실시하기로 하였습니다.
The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency says at least 316 residents of nursing hospitals or nursing homes have died. When the Korean Disease Control and Prevention Agency reports a record 14 deaths in one day, 70% of them are residents of nursing homes or nursing hospitals. Earlier in the day, the country's Justice Ministry imposes the highest social distancing measure on detention facilities for 2 weeks, which ban visits, work and classes, after 792 coronavirus cases confirmed at Seoul Dongbu Detention Center.
Hundreds of people attend funeral of mother and child who killed by Filipino police.
Hundreds of sympathizers, friends, and relatives gather and join in a procession from the victim's house to a nearby cemetery as tearful family members paid their final respects. The remains of a mother and her son are laid to rest 1 week after the two are shot by an off-duty police officer in Tarlac province, north of the Philippines capital. Sonia Gregorio, 52, and 25-year-old son Frank Gregorio were shot after a row over noise triggering accusations from activists that President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs had created a culture of police impunity. In a video record on a family member's mobile phone, policeman Jonel Nuesca was seen engaging in a heated argument with the Gregorios over the use of a homemade noisemaker typically used to celebrate New Year. When Sonia wrapped her arms around her son, as the row intensified, Nuesca shot her in the head before doing the same to Frank. Before fleeing, Nuesca shot Sonia Gregorio again. Nuesca surrendered to police that night and faces 2 counts of murder.
After lockdown, Cambodia government reopens the activities in the country.
Cambodia reopens schools, museums, entertainment venues, bars and sports stadiums after a 5-week lockdown aimed to curbing coronavirus infections across the country. Students could be seen queuing up for temperature checks and hand washing at the local primary school in the capital of Phnom Penh. Venues are technically allowed to open, but many only resume due to the public holiday. Cambodia enforced a total of 3 nationwide lockdowns during the pandemic. Coffee vendor says they worry that the virus can spread again after the coronavirus increasing in Thailand and Cambodia.
According to the news I read on social media, there has been a coronavirus surge in Thailand and Cambodia. Who work in some provinces, they were infected. So I'm so worried that they could spread it here again.
According to the tuk-tuk driver, the citizens worry on coronavirus disease, but they always follow the health protocol that implemented by the government.
I'm
worried that we can get infected, but I see that we Cambodians followed the instructions set up by the government on wearing masks, washing hands with sanitizer or soap, and social distancing. So I think we have less risk of infection than in Thailand and in Vietnam. According to data released by the country's Ministry of Health, Cambodia records a total number of 382 COVID-19 infections and no deaths since the beginning of the pandemic.
The main minister of Thailand apologized to the people for the coronavirus measures after the case increases in the country.
Thailand's Prime Minister apologizes to the people for the coronavirus measures and the inconvenience posed after the country's biggest outbreak. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha says the government was mindful of the potential economic damage from strong containment measures. I'm sorry for any inconvenience, especially in the provinces that have strict measures. But this is not a lockdown. There are only extra precautions. Thailand records 8,439 coronavirus cases and 65 deaths overall, among the lowest number in Asia. Most new cases were linked to a cluster among migrant workers in Samut Sakong, a coastal province southwest of Bangkok, and led to infections in more than half of the country's provinces. In Bangkok, restaurants and food vendors have to halt dine-in services at 9 p.m. Alcohol sales in restaurants have been banned and bars and other entertainment venues closed in high-risk provinces. Provincial governors have been empowered to set restrictions. Schools and education centers nationwide have been closed for a month. Thailand will receive its first COVID-19 vaccines in February from China's Sinovac Biotech and will have the capacity to produce 200 million doses a year, locally of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
South Korea signs an agreement with Moderna Inc. regarding the COVID-19 vaccine to vaccinate 20 million people.
South Korea's presidential office at news conference says South Korea will sign a deal with Moderna Inc. to offer COVID-19 vaccines for 20 million people.
어제 문 대통령과 반셀 CEO 간의 합의에 따라
Today we have agreement between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Moderna Inc. Chief Executive Officer Stephen Banchel. The government and Moderna are planning to sign a contract within the year for enough doses of vaccine to cover 20 million people.
접종이 가능한 물량의 백신 공급 계약을 연내 체결할 계획입니다.
Seoul plans to start its vaccination in February with health workers and vulnerable people first in line, but the government has been criticized for that schedule in light of vaccinations underway in the United States and European Union. Kwon Jung-wook, Deputy Director of the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, says the infections mainly occur in high-risk and vulnerable groups with underlying conditions. But the recent increase in cluster infections in nursing homes and medical facilities has resulted in large proportion of cases among older patients. The agency adds there are 1,046 new coronavirus cases, bringing the total to 58,725 with 859 deaths. The new cases, 1,030, are locally transmission and more than half are found in Seoul.
Indonesia starts distributing China's Sinovac vaccine to 34 provinces in the country.
Indonesia's state-owned vaccine manufacturer Bio Farma begins distributing a vaccine developed by Chinese pharmaceutical company Sinovac across its 34 provinces. Bio Farma spokesman Bambang Herianto says in a press conference that the country has prepared some 10,000 medical facilities and over 40 port health offices to help distribute the Sinovac vaccine. According to the spokesperson, all preparations have been made to ensure that the temperature of the entire cold chain transport process is maintained between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius. At the same press conference, the Health Ministry's vaccination spokeswoman, Siti Nadia Tarmizi, says Sinovac's vaccine has achieved satisfactory clinical trial results in Turkey and Brazil, and the results also match the third phase clinical trial results of the vaccine currently being conducted in Indonesia.
Indonesia decides to release radical ulama Muslim leader Abu Bakar Bashir from prison.
Indonesia will release radical cleric and alleged mastermind of the 2002 Bali bombings, Abu Bakar Bashir, from prison later this week upon completion of his jail term. Bashir, 82, who was among Indonesia's most notorious extremists, is considered the spiritual leader of the Al-Qaeda-linked Jemaah Islamiyah network. He was jailed in 2011 for his links to militant training camps in Aceh province. Jemaah Islamiyah accuses of plotting several big attacks in Indonesia and includes operative training in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the southern Philippines. Its members are accused of orchestrating the 2002 bombings of Bali nightclubs, which killed more than 200 people, among them scores of Australians, and an attack on the JW Marriott Hotel in Jakarta that killed 12 people a year later. Bashir denied any involvement in the Bali bombings. A lawyer of Bashir did not immediately respond to Reuters' request for comment on his upcoming release. Security analyst Ridwan Habib says that though Bashir's status has weakened, extremists may try to associate their activities with him to gain traction and boost their credibility. While seeking re-election, President Joko Widodo in January 2019 had considered an early release for Bashir on health grounds, but scrapped the plan after Bashir reportedly declined to pledge allegiance to the Indonesian state ideology.
Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a nice weekend.